Anxiety rules modern life. Parents suffocate their children with fear of failure, students drown in self-doubt, workers crumble under deadlines, and businesses collapse before they even begin because of hesitation. But what if I told you, in the brutal words of Machiavelli, that anxiety is nothing but an illusion? That every ounce of energy you spend worrying is wasted, because it builds nothing? In this video, we tear apart the illusion of anxiety and expose how Machiavelli himself would dismantle it if he lived in today's world. From parenting to family arguments, from classrooms to offices, from boardrooms to business deals, nothing is off limits. So pay close attention, because this is going to be brutally honest. Anxiety today wears many disguises: the nervous parent hovering over a child's grades, the employee trembling before a boss's feedback, the entrepreneur paralyzed before a deal. Yet Machiavelli would cut through every disguise with one merciless claim: anxiety is an illusion. It is a self-made ghost that holds no true power, except the power you surrender to it. If he lived in today's world, he would not waste his time nursing feelings, he would act. He would strike at problems directly, because hesitation means weakness, and weakness has no place in a life of ambition. Picture the parent constantly stressing about their child's future. They hover over homework, micromanage schedules, and panic if grades dip for even a moment. Anxiety drives them into conflict with their child, poisoning the relationship. Machiavelli would scorn this. He would tell the parent, "Your worry builds nothing, your control suffocates." Instead of trembling at failure, instill resilience. If the child fails, let them learn strength. If they succeed, let them own it. In Machiavelli's eyes, a parent who bows to anxiety raises a child crippled by fear. A parent who strips away the illusion raises a child ready to lead. Consider the family argument over money, chores, or responsibilities. Most people drown in anxiety, fearing confrontation, or fearing disapproval if they speak their mind. They stew in silence until resentment explodes. Machiavelli would ridicule such weakness. He would say, "Speak clearly, demand respect, impose order." Conflict delayed by anxiety only festers. But conflict faced directly creates clarity. In today's families, where voices often go unheard, Machiavelli would tell you to stop worrying about hurt feelings and start commanding the respect needed to preserve peace. Anxiety clouds, decisive words cut through. In education, anxiety shows up in children fearing exams as if their lives depended on a single grade. Parents feed this by equating worth with numbers. Teachers amplify it by threatening futures with every test. But Machiavelli would call this illusion. He would argue that grades are tools, not gods. A child crippled by anxiety studies out of fear, never mastery. He would advise parents and teachers alike to replace trembling with strategy, train children to view challenges as opportunities to gain advantage, not punishments to endure. In today's school systems, Machiavelli's approach would dismantle the illusion of failure by reframing every test as preparation for power. Walk into a modern workplace and you will smell anxiety like stale air. Employees fear speaking in meetings, fear disagreeing with bosses, fear losing their jobs if they stand firm. This anxiety breeds mediocrity. Machiavelli would sneer at the meekness. He would say, "Your silence gives others power over you." The illusion of anxiety convinces you that risk is death, when in truth, silence is. He would counsel workers to act boldly, to voice ideas with confidence, and to see confrontation not as danger but as leverage. In his view, a workplace ruled by anxiety is nothing but a prison where talent rots. A worker who rejects illusion seizes influence. Look at the manager who avoids difficult conversations with underperforming staff because anxiety whispers that they'll quit or retaliate. or hate them. Machiavelli would call this cowardice. He would insist that hesitation is decay. To him, decisive action, no matter how harsh, preserves order and ensures progress. In today's corporate world, the leader who bows to anxiety breeds weakness across the team. The leader who confronts problems directly, even brutally, commands respect and builds a culture of strength. In business transactions, anxiety cripples entrepreneurs. They hesitate to pitch boldly, terrified of rejection. They agree to bad deals because anxiety convinces them it is safer than risking offense. Machiavelli would crush this mentality. He would remind them that hesitation makes you prey. In his ruthless logic, the negotiator who speaks with conviction, who risks denial for the chance of dominance, is the one who thrives. Business today, flooded with timid deals, would be fertile ground for his teachings. Anxiety is not protection, it is surrender. To succeed, one must demand without trembling. Even in friendships, anxiety poisons bonds. People swallow their true thoughts, fearing judgment, and become shadows of themselves. Machiavelli would see this as self-betrayal. He would say, better to have fewer friends who respect your honesty than many who only know your mask. In today's digital world of curated images and false smiles, Machiavelli's dismissal of anxiety would strip away the illusion of acceptance, leaving only authentic strength. Romantic relationships drown in anxiety as well. Partners overthink every text, every silence, every tone of voice, building nightmares out of shadows. Machiavelli would laugh at such fragility. He would say, stop worshipping insecurity. Speak directly, demand clarity, and if trust is absent, end it without hesitation. In his view, modern love collapses because people surrender to the illusion that worry is care. But care without action is weakness, and weakness ruins bonds. In parenting again, imagine the anxious father who refuses to let his daughter walk alone to school because something might happen. Machiavelli would call him blind. Yes, danger exists, but anxiety does nothing to stop it. Action does. Teach her awareness. Teach her strength. Teach her to defend herself, and you give her power instead of paranoia. In today's fearful societies, Machiavelli's brutal lesson is this: overprotection breeds helplessness, while discipline creates independence. Picture a student terrified to speak in class, fearing embarrassment. Anxiety silences them, stunting growth. Machiavelli would command, force yourself to speak, even if your voice shakes. The classroom is not a place to cower but to sharpen weapons of thought. He would argue that anxiety keeps students chained to mediocrity while boldness carves paths to influence. In today's competitive world, the silent student loses opportunities, while the bold one bends futures to their will. In workplaces, entire teams are paralyzed by anxious leadership. A boss avoids risks, delays decisions, and cloaks in endless planning. Machiavelli would slash through the excuses. Indecision is death. In his ruthless pragmatism, mistakes made boldly are superior to safety drowned in hesitation. He would argue that companies collapse not because of failure but because of leaders too anxious to face risk. Today's market punishes the timid. Anxiety here is not a shield, it is the executioner. In business partnerships, anxiety often convinces people to hold back their true expectations, hoping to keep the peace. Machiavelli would tear this apart. He would insist that clarity, even if brutal, is the only foundation for strong alliances. A partner who fears offending will one day be betrayed by their silence. Today's entrepreneurs, fearful of tension, mistake anxiety for diplomacy. In truth, it is weakness disguised as caution. Family dinners often turn into battlegrounds of passive aggression. Parents and children avoid real conversations, fearing confrontation. Anxiety weaves silence into the walls until resentment erupts. Machiavelli would dismantle this illusion. He would argue, better to face conflict head-on than to let it rot in the shadows. In modern households, anxiety masquerades as keeping the peace, but it is nothing but the slow decay of unity. Brutal honesty, no matter how uncomfortable, preserves strength. In classrooms, anxiety shows in children comparing themselves constantly, paralyzed by fear of being less than others. Machiavelli would strike this down. He would say, stop trembling at others' progress. Focus on your own advantage. Competition should drive growth, not fear. Today's students, drowning in comparison, waste energy on illusions instead of sharpening their strengths. Anxiety in comparison is a mirage, power lies in self-mastery. Look at an employee offered a promotion who hesitates out of anxiety. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? Machiavelli would ridicule such doubt. He would insist, take the position, claim the title, and adapt with force. To him, readiness is never born from anxiety. It is born from action. In today's career ladder, opportunities vanish for the anxious. Boldness seizes doors before they close. Even in health, anxiety cripples modern people. They read symptoms online and spiral into fear before seeing a doctor. Machiavelli would call this self-sabotage. Worry cures nothing, decisive action does. In his view, fear of illness magnifies weakness, while confronting it with discipline preserves strength. Today's health-obsessed culture feeds anxiety, but he would cut it down with one merciless truth: worrying about death makes you die faster. Social media thrives on anxiety. People fear missing out, fear judgment, fear obscurity. They contort themselves for likes. Enslaved to illusion. Machiavelli would sneer at this digital weakness. He would argue, if you seek power, use the platform as a weapon, not as a mirror. Anxiety over approval is wasted breath. In today's online arena, he would crush illusions and teach strategy, manipulate attention, never beg for it. In every sphere, parenting, family, school, work, business, anxiety appears as a phantom demanding obedience. Machiavelli would strip the mask and expose the emptiness. His lesson is merciless: stop feeding illusions. Act. Command. Seize. Because in today's world, the anxious are devoured by the bold, and illusions are shattered only by ruthless clarity. The truth is harsh, but it cannot be denied. Anxiety doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. Machiavelli would tell you to stop feeding the illusion and start acting with discipline, clarity, and ruthless intent. Parenting, school, work, business, all demand action, not fear. If you want to win in life, you must face reality directly. Strip away the illusions, and do what must be done. Now, if this video gave you the perspective you need to see anxiety for what it really is, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this brutal truth. Because the more we expose illusions, the stronger we all become.